The studio lights blazed down on the glossy set of Morning Wellness with Sandra Blake, casting harsh shadows across the pristine white furniture. Ozzy Osbourne sat uncomfortably in a lotus position on what appeared to be the world's most expensive meditation cushion, his leather pants creaking with every slight movement. His trademark round sunglasses reflected the camera lenses like dark mirrors, hiding eyes that had seen decades of rock and roll madness. "Welcome back to Morning Wellness," Sandra Blake chirped with her practiced television smile, her yoga outfit so pristine it practically sparkled under the studio lights. "We're here with rock legend Ozzy Osbourne, who's agreed to demonstrate the ancient art of meditation live on our show. Ozzy, how are you feeling about this spiritual journey?" Ozzy shifted awkwardly, his Birmingham accent cutting through the studio's artificial serenity. "Well, Sharon thought it might be good for me, you know? All those years of, well, let's just say I've done things that weren't exactly Zen-like. Figure it's time to find some inner peace or whatever." He paused, glancing at the cameras with a mixture of confusion and mild terror. "Though, I've got to be honest, love, I'm more comfortable with a microphone than I am with all this sitting still nonsense." If you're enjoying this wild story so far, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting that like button. It really helps us bring you more incredible content like this. Now, let's see what happens when the Prince of Darkness tries to find his inner light. The meditation instructor, a serene woman named Luna Starweaver, who looked like she'd been born doing downward dog, approached with the kind of ethereal grace that made normal people feel clumsy. Her flowing robes whispered against the studio floor as she positioned herself beside Ozzy's cushion. "Now, Mr. Osbourne," Luna began, her voice so soft it was barely audible above the studio's air conditioning. "We're going to start with some basic breathing exercises. Close your eyes and imagine a peaceful place." Ozzy obediently shut his eyes behind his sunglasses, though his face scrunched up in concentration, like he was trying to solve advanced calculus. "Right, peaceful place. Got it. There's this pub in Birmingham. Perhaps somewhere in nature," Luna gently corrected, her hands moving in flowing gestures that seemed to dance through the air. "A forest clearing, or a quiet beach." "Oh, right. Nature." Ozzy's brow furrowed deeper. "There was this cemetery I used to visit." Sandra Blake's smile twitched slightly as she realized this live segment might not go as planned. The camera operators exchanged worried glances, but the show must go on. After all, this was cable television's most ambitious crossover event. Heavy metal meets mindfulness. "Just breathe, Mr. Osbourne," Luna continued, seemingly unfazed by his unconventional approach to Zen. "Let your mind drift like a leaf on a gentle stream." What happened next would become the most replayed, analyzed, and downright terrifying piece of live television in broadcasting history. As Ozzy began to breathe deeply, something shifted in the studio atmosphere. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees, though the thermostat hadn't been touched. The bright television lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized, but their glow had taken on an oddly greenish tint that made everyone's skin look sickly. "That's it," Luna whispered, apparently oblivious to the changing environment. "Feel your consciousness expanding, reaching out into the universe." Ozzy's breathing had become rhythmic, deep, almost hypnotic. His body, which had been tense and fidgety throughout the morning, now sat perfectly still, too still. The kind of stillness that makes people unconsciously hold their breath and lean forward in their chairs. Behind the cameras, the studio crew began to notice strange things. Bob, the audio engineer, watched his meters fluctuate wildly, despite no change in the studio's sound levels. The digital clocks on various pieces of equipment began showing different times, as if time itself had become unreliable. One camera operator later swore his lens cap, which had been sitting securely on a nearby table, started spinning slowly on its own. Sandra Blake, ever the professional, continued her commentary, even as a creeping sense of unease settled over the studio. As we can see, Ozzy is really getting into the meditation zone. The transformation is quite remarkable, from rock and roll wildman to Zen master in just minutes. But Luna Starweaver had stopped her gentle guidance. She stood frozen beside Ozzy's cushion, her face pale and her usually serene expression replaced by something approaching alarm. The experienced meditation instructor had guided thousands of people through spiritual journeys, but she had never felt anything like the energy that was now radiating from the man beside her. It started as a low humming sound, so quiet that the audience at home might have mistaken it for a technical glitch. But in the studio, everyone could feel it, a vibration that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, resonating in their bones and making their teeth ache. The sound grew gradually louder, and with it came a sensation that the very air was becoming thick, almost viscous. Ozzy's lips began to move, though no words came out at first. His head tilted back slightly, and even through his dark sunglasses, everyone could see that something had changed about his expression. The familiar lines of confusion and mild bewilderment had been replaced by something ancient and knowing, and utterly terrifying. Om Mani Padme Hum, he began to chant, but the words came out wrong. They weren't quite the traditional Sanskrit, and they weren't quite English either. They seemed to twist and writhe in the air, forming shapes that hurt to look at directly. The studio's main camera began to malfunction, its usually steady image wavering like heat mirages. Through the distortion, viewers at home watched as shadows that shouldn't exist began to gather around Ozzy's meditation cushion. These weren't ordinary shadows cast by the studio lights. They moved independently, reaching and grasping like living things. Ozzy? Sandra Blake's professional composure finally cracked. Her voice came out as a squeak as she stared at her guest, who had begun to levitate approximately 3 inches above his cushion. Ozzy, I think maybe we should take a commercial break. But Ozzy was no longer Ozzy, at least not entirely. When he opened his eyes, they glowed with an inner light that had nothing to do with stage effects or contact lenses. His voice, when he spoke, carried harmonics that shouldn't have been possible from a human throat. The veil grows thin, he intoned, and every piece of electronic equipment in the studio sparked simultaneously. The old songs echo in the spaces between heartbeats. They have been waiting so long to be heard again. The meditation instructor stumbled backward, her New Age serenity completely shattered. This isn't what meditation is supposed to do, she stammered, her voice barely audible over the growing harmonic resonance filling the studio. The shadows around Ozzy began to take on more definite shapes, tall, angular forms that seemed to be watching the proceedings with ancient, patient eyes. The temperature continued to drop, and several crew members noticed their breath beginning to fog in the suddenly frigid air. Mr. Osbourne, Sandra tried again, her teeth chattering as she spoke. Perhaps we should call this segment to a close. But Ozzy, or whatever was speaking through him, had more to say. The frequencies align. The meditation opens doors that have been sealed since the first song was sung in darkness. They remember the old ways, the old words. They remember when music was magic, and magic was music. The studio's sound system began to emit feedback, but not the sharp, painful kind familiar from rock concerts. This was different, a deep, thrumming resonance that seemed to bypass the ears entirely and vibrate directly in the listeners' souls. Several crew members later reported feeling an overwhelming urge to sing along, though they had no idea what they would be singing. As the phenomenon intensified, the very structure of the studio seemed to respond. The carefully constructed set pieces began to vibrate in harmony with the otherworldly humming. The pristine white furniture developed hairline cracks that spread in intricate patterns, like ancient runic symbols being carved by invisible hands. The live broadcast was being watched by millions, and phone lines across the country began lighting up as viewers called to report similar strange occurrences in their own homes. Television sets flickered and sparked, pets hid under furniture, and more than one person claimed to see shadowy figures gathering at the edges of their vision. Back in the studio, Luna Starweaver had abandoned all pretense of maintaining control over the situation. She stood pressed against the far wall, clutching a crystal pendant and muttering what sounded like protection spells under her breath. "This is wrong," she kept repeating. "Meditation doesn't do this. It doesn't open these kinds of doors." Sandra Blake, to her credit, was still trying to maintain some semblance of professional broadcasting standards, even as her perfect hair began to stand on end from the static electricity building in the air. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced to the cameras, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding her. "We seem to be experiencing some unusual phenomena during our meditation segment. We'll be right back after these messages." But the control room wasn't responding to her signals. Through the booth's windows, she could see the technical crew standing transfixed, staring at their monitors, which were displaying impossible readings. Every gauge was redlined, every meter was maxed out, and yet somehow the equipment kept functioning. Ozzy's chanting had evolved into something that could barely be called language anymore. The sounds coming from his throat seemed to be reaching backward through time, touching something primal and powerful that predated human civilization. The shadows around him had grown more distinct, and now even the most skeptical crew members could see that they weren't tricks of light and lens. These entities, for lack of a better word, stood 8 feet tall and seemed to be composed of crystallized music itself. They moved with a rhythm that matched no earthly song, their forms shifting and flowing like living sound waves. When they turned their attention to the humans in the studio, everyone present felt the weight of an intelligence so vast and alien that it made their minds reel. The head camera operator, a veteran of 30 years in television, later described the experience. It was like looking into the eyes of a song that had been singing since before the first star was born. These things weren't evil, exactly, but they were so far beyond human understanding that they might as well have been. And they were definitely interested in what Ozzy was doing. As the meditation continued, reality itself seemed to become negotiable. The studio's dimensions began to shift and warp, walls stretching and contracting like they were breathing. The ceiling appeared to open up into a vast space filled with swirling galaxies and impossible geometries. Through this cosmic aperture, more entities began to descend, beings of pure sound and light that had never known physical form. The audio engineer's equipment registered frequencies that shouldn't exist, harmonics that violated the laws of physics, and overtones that seemed to echo from parallel dimensions. His carefully calibrated instruments, designed to capture the nuances of human speech and music, were completely overwhelmed by the cosmic symphony pouring through Ozzy's transformed vocal cords. "The bridge is complete," the entity speaking through Ozzy announced, its voice now a chorus of impossible harmonies. "The meditation has opened the way. The old songs remember their purpose." At this moment, something extraordinary happened that would be debated by theologians, scientists, and conspiracy theorists for decades to come. Every person in the studio, from the terrified host to the bewildered crew members, suddenly understood, not with their minds, but with something deeper and more fundamental. They comprehended that music had always been more than entertainment, more than art, more than emotional expression. It was a technology, a method of communication that transcended the boundaries between dimensions. And meditation, true meditation, was the key that could tune human consciousness to receive these cosmic broadcasts. The entities that had answered Ozzy's unknowing call weren't invaders or demons. They were librarians of sorts, keepers of the universe's greatest songs, melodies that could reshape reality, harmonies that could heal or destroy, rhythms that synchronized with the heartbeat of existence itself. But human minds weren't designed to process this level of cosmic awareness directly. One by one, the studio crew began to experience what could only be described as transcendent overload. They didn't lose consciousness so much as expand beyond the ability to maintain normal awareness. Sandra Blake found herself remembering songs she had never learned, melodies from civilizations that had existed before Earth had cooled. The meditation instructor discovered that every technique she had ever taught was a pale shadow of practices that originated among beings of pure consciousness. Even the skeptical camera operators found themselves weeping as they experienced the emotional resonance of music that encompassed the joy and sorrow of entire galaxies. Through it all, Ozzy sat at the center of the maelstrom, no longer the confused rock star who had reluctantly agreed to try meditation on live television. He had become a conduit for forces that existed beyond the normal boundaries of space and time. His consciousness stretched across dimensions to touch the fundamental frequencies that underlie all of reality. The climax came when the entities began to sing. It wasn't sound in any conventional sense. It was pure meaning conveyed through vibration, emotion transmitted through harmony, knowledge shared through rhythm. The song they sang told the story of the universe itself, From the first moment when silence gave birth to sound, through the eons of cosmic evolution, to the present moment where a confused heavy metal singer had accidentally opened a doorway between worlds. The studio's recording equipment, pushed far beyond its design limits, somehow managed to capture fragments of this impossible performance. Audio engineers who later analyzed the recordings found layers of meaning embedded in the waveforms, mathematical constants encoded in the rhythm, scientific formulas hidden in the harmony, and philosophical truths woven into the melody. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the entire event was how it ended. As suddenly as it had begun, the cosmic concert concluded. The entities, having shared their message, began to fade back into whatever dimension they had emerged from. The studio's temperature returned to normal, the electronic equipment stopped sparking, and the shadows retreated to their proper positions. Ozzy, still levitating slightly above his meditation cushion, slowly opened his eyes and looked around the chaos-filled studio with an expression of complete bewilderment. "Did I fall asleep?" he asked in his normal Birmingham accent. "Because I had the weirdest bloody dream." The silence that followed was profound. Everyone in the studio stared at him, trying to process what they had just experienced. Sandra Blake's perfect makeup was smudged, her hair was disheveled, and her usual professional composure had been replaced by the wide-eyed expression of someone who had just witnessed the impossible. "Ozzy," she said carefully, "do you remember what just happened?" He scratched his head, looking genuinely confused. "Well, I remember sitting down and trying to think about peaceful places. Then everything got a bit fuzzy. Did the meditation work? I feel pretty relaxed, actually." Luna Starweaver, still pressed against the wall and clutching her crystal pendant, let out a shaky laugh. "Mr. Osbourne, in 30 years of teaching meditation, I have never... what you just did wasn't in any textbook I've ever read." The control room finally managed to cut to commercial, giving everyone a few minutes to collect themselves and try to make sense of what had occurred. But even during the break, the phones continued ringing as viewers across the country reported that the broadcast had somehow affected them too. Some claimed to have experienced visions, others said they suddenly understood advanced mathematics, and a few swore they could now hear colors and see sounds. When the show returned from commercial, Sandra Blake faced the cameras with as much composure as she could muster. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've just witnessed something unprecedented. While we can't fully explain what occurred during our meditation segment, we want to assure our viewers that everyone in the studio is safe and well." Ozzy, meanwhile, had returned to his normal fidgety self, clearly uncomfortable with all the attention. "Look, I don't know what happened either," he told the cameras. "Sharon's always saying I should try new things, but I think next time I'll stick to something simpler. Maybe yoga. Though, knowing my luck, I'd probably accidentally achieve enlightenment or something equally embarrassing." The aftermath of the meditation incident, as it came to be known, was unprecedented in television history. The footage was analyzed by everyone from quantum physicists to religious scholars, each finding evidence to support their particular theories about what had occurred. Scientists noted that several established laws of physics appeared to have been temporarily suspended during the broadcast. Theologians argued that Ozzy had accidentally performed a form of prayer so pure that it had attracted the attention of angelic beings. Music theorists became obsessed with the harmonic structures they detected in the recorded audio, finding mathematical relationships that shouldn't have been possible. But perhaps the most significant impact was on meditation practices worldwide. Luna Starweaver found herself inundated with requests from people wanting to learn the technique that had produced such dramatic results. She was forced, however, to disappoint them, because whatever Ozzy had done, it hadn't been any form of meditation she recognized. It was like he bypassed all the normal safeguards of consciousness, she explained in later interviews. Most meditation practices are designed to gradually expand awareness while maintaining psychological stability. What Mr. Osbourne did was more like using a nuclear weapon to light a candle. Effective, but not recommended for beginners. Ozzy himself seemed largely unaffected by the experience, though Sharon later reported that he had started unconsciously humming melodies that made their dogs howl and their houseplants grow at an accelerated rate. He also developed an uncanny ability to predict which songs would become hits, though he claimed this was just lucky guessing. The morning wellness show never fully recovered from the incident. While ratings skyrocketed initially, Sandra Blake found it impossible to return to her usual format of gentle lifestyle tips and celebrity interviews. How do you discuss aromatherapy after witnessing the fundamental nature of reality being revealed through interdimensional karaoke? The show was eventually renamed Beyond the Veil with Sandra Blake and focused on investigating paranormal phenomena, though nothing they encountered ever quite matched the cosmic significance of Ozzy's accidental meditation session. As for the scientific community, the pop recordings from that morning continue to yield new discoveries years later. Audio analysis has revealed what appear to be star charts encoded in the harmonic frequencies, and several breakthrough discoveries in quantum mechanics have been traced back to insights gained from studying the impossible waveforms captured during the broadcast. But perhaps the most important lesson from the entire experience was summed up by Ozzy himself during a follow-up interview months later. The universe is a lot. Weirder than any of us realized, and apparently I'm some kind of cosmic tuning fork. Who knew? All those years Sharon told me I was special, and it turns out she was right, just not in the way any of us expected. Thank you so much for reading this incredible story. If you enjoyed this wild journey into the unknown, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Your support helps us continue bringing you amazing content like this. What do you think really happened during Ozzy's meditation? Let us know in the comments below, and make sure to hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest stories. The morning wellness meditation incident remains one of the most documented and analyzed paranormal events in modern history, proof that sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries come from the most unexpected sources, and that rock stars, even when trying to find inner peace, can still manage to turn the volume up to 11 on reality itself.